When you hear Studio Ghibli, you probably think of flying castles, talking spirits, and quiet dreams. But hidden inside that gentle universe is a film that is not a fantasy, but a brutal, unflinching horror story. Princess Mononoke looks like an epic about nature and humanity, but look closer and it's something much darker. It's body horror, myth, and history bleeding together into one brutal story. By the end, you'll see why this movie is the disturbing film of Studio Ghibli. The story, as we remember it, is an epic. We meet Ashitaka, the last prince of the Emishi tribe, a people long erased from history. When a boar god attacks his village, Ashitaka kills it, but he is infected with a deadly curse. It gives him superhuman strength, but the curse is also alive. It's a parasite of hatred that eats at him from within. Banished from his home, Ashitaka travels west to see with eyes unclouded by hate, searching for the source of the iron ball that poisoned the boar god. His journey leads him to the edge of civilization, Irontown. It's ruled by Lady Eboshi, a woman both ruthless and visionary. She's built a refuge for society's outcasts, lepers, former prostitutes, the forgotten, and armed them with gunpowder and purpose. To fuel her forges, they cut deep into the ancient forest. But the forest is alive. It belongs to the old gods, vast primal beasts, and their champion, San, a human girl raised by the wolf goddess Moro. She is the Princess Mononoke. Ashitaka stands caught between two worlds, Irontown's hunger for progress and the gods' furious defense of the wild. But it's not a battle of good versus evil. That's the story most of us remember. The sweeping myth, the tragic romance, the moral struggle. But that's only the surface. It is actually a story about flesh, corruption, and the horror of what it means to be human. To uncover it, we start where all decay begins, in the body itself. Before Princess Mononoke, Studio Ghibli lived mostly in the realm of fantasy. Magical creatures, symbolic wars, clean violence. But here, something changed. The violence is physical, shocking, and real. Arrows tear through flesh. Heads come off. Limbs fly. It's the ugly, grinding horror of real war. You're meant to feel it. But the most horrifying thing in this film, however, isn't the gore, but the disease. Ashitaka's curse is Ghibli's most disturbing creation. It's not a simple magical mark, but a living infection, a parasite made of hatred. We see it pulse through his arm like veins coming alive, writhing under the skin. When it flares, it takes control, turning his arm into something inhuman, strong enough to kill, but driven by a will that isn't his. The fear of your own body betraying you. This is body horror worthy of David Cronenberg. It taps into the horror of being consumed by what you carry inside. Each time the curse acts, Ashitaka becomes both victim and weapon. He is forced to commit violence he doesn't choose. The enemy is growing within. That same corruption spreads through the world around him. The boar gods, Nago and Okoto, suffer identical fates. They aren't simply monsters by nature, but they're noble beings, driven insane by pain. The film forces us to watch their transformation in detail. Have you wondered why? When Nago dies, his body erupts in a tide of black worms that crawl across the earth like living hatred. It's pure nightmare fuel, a visual metaphor for rage turned infectious. And Akoto's final descent is even worse. Blinded and wounded, he leads his clan to certain death. As their blood spreads, his body darkens, twisting into a living nest of red tendrils. By the time he collapses, he's no longer an animal. He's turned into a moving mass of flesh and rage. It's a vision of hell, animated by nothing but blind rage. So why this sudden, shocking pivot to gore and decay? Well, this was a conscious rebellion. In the early 1990s, Miyazaki was deeply shaken by images of real-world violence, especially the wars in the former Yugoslavia. He spoke about how those conflicts made him question the purpose of storytelling for the young. Was it right, he asked, to protect children from the truth of the world? His answer was no. He believed stories shouldn't hide violence behind symbols, and we should look at the real cost of such conflict. So in Princess Mononoke, hatred is a living, rotting thing. It tears bodies apart, deforms beauty, and spreads like a virus. The film's bloodshed is an act of protest, a rejection of sanitized heroism. That's why even the smallest moments of violence feel unbearable, and the scene is quick but heavy. It's a reminder that power born of hate destroys indiscriminately. But if we stop here, we miss the film's deeper sickness, a history of suffering that Japan itself once tried to bury. The next layer of Princess Mononoke's horror isn't fantasy at all, but a history of our own. Miyazaki sets the story during Japan's Muromachi period, a deliberate and brutal choice. Forget the postcard image of noble samurai under cherry blossoms. This was a 200-year nightmare, a time of famine, disease, and endless civil war. Villages burned, people starved, and power shifted like sand. The film's atmosphere is actually historical realism, where life was cheap, and the struggle to survive was a bloody daily reality. That context changes everything about Ashitaka. He's the last prince of the Emishi, an indigenous people who once resisted Japan's imperial expansion. They were real, a culture slowly erased, conquered, and absorbed by the Yamato rulers. By the Muromachi era, they were ghosts of the past. When Miyazaki calls Ashitaka the last of his tribe, it's a eulogy. His curse, then, becomes more than a magical infection. It's symbolic of extinction, the hatred of the new world eating away at what's left of the old. So Ashitaka isn't cursed for killing a god, he's cursed for living in a world that no longer has a place for him. The tragedy of his people is carved directly into his skin. But the film's darkest secret lies not with him, but inside Irontown. At first, Irontown feels like a triumph of progress, a community where the rejected and forgotten can finally belong. Lady Eboshi has built a refuge for the outcast, somehow miraculous. The people working her forges are bandaged, trembling, and hidden from the world. For years, their identity was only speculation. Then, in a 2016 interview, Miyazaki confirmed it. They are victims of leprosy, or Hansen's disease. Suddenly, Irontown becomes a historical leper colony. In feudal Japan, lepers were the ultimate outcasts. They were treated as cursed, abandoned by their families, exiled from their villages, and left to die in isolation. Their bodies decayed slowly, their pain made invisible. Lady Eboshi, then, becomes much more than a simple warlord. She's a savior to them. We see her visit their sanctuary, personally tending to their wounds, washing their rotting flesh, touching them without fear. She gives them dignity. But there's a cruel paradox at the heart of that compassion. Eboshi saves the sick, only to have them forge the weapons that will destroy the gods. She rescues them from society, yet uses their bodies to fuel her war against nature. Her kindness becomes a machine of exploitation. She's a saint to her people and a monster to everything else. And that's what makes Princess Mononoke so unsettling. No one is purely good. No one is purely evil. Progress and destruction are two sides of the same blade. Lady Eboshi is perhaps Miyazaki's most haunting creation because she mirrors our own contradictions. She empowers women and the disabled while driving nature to extinction. She's the architect of both compassion and apocalypse. In her, Miyazaki holds up a mirror to modern civilization. We build our miracles on the bones of the forgotten. This moral horror is far more disturbing than any monster with fangs and claws. There is no easy way to feel about Lady Eboshi. It's the realization that human progress has always come at the cost of something sacred. And it forces us to ask, what are we willing to sacrifice for comfort, for safety, for survival? This historical realism roots every wound in real human suffering. But even history can't explain the film's deepest unease. But there is one final layer we must excavate. a spiritual dread that whispers that the universe does not care if we live or die. The deepest horror of Princess Mononoke doesn't come from flesh or history. It comes from the gods. We, the Western audiences, often read the film as an environmental fable. Humans versus nature, with the forest as a kind of benevolent Mother Earth. But that's a misunderstanding. In Japanese mythology, nature isn't gentle. Even the title warns us. Mononoke doesn't mean spirit of nature. It means vengeful spirit, a being that brings sickness, suffering, or death. So when San is called the Princess Mononoke, she is the vengeful spirit princess. She is the embodiment of the forest's rage, a forest's weapon aimed at humanity. Every divine creature in the film reflects that same truth. Moro, the wolf goddess, is wise and articulate, but she is filled with a cold, absolute hatred for humanity. She sees them as foolish, ugly creatures, and her only goal is their extinction. To her, humans are a disease that must be purged. The boar gods, by contrast, represent the madness of resistance. They are driven by a blind, all-consuming rage that leads them on suicidal charges against human technology. They are fighting to preserve their own existence, and they will kill anything that stands in their way. They are forces of nature, territorial, violent, and utterly without human morality. But the film's most haunting creation is the Shishigami, the forest spirit. It is a force of pure life and death, and beyond our comprehension of good and evil. As it walks, plants sprout and wither in its footsteps. It heals Ashitaka and kills the dying boar with equal serenity. It does not answer prayers. It does not choose sides. It simply is, which is why its transformation is so horrifying. When Lady Eboshi's bullet strikes it and Jigo's men sever its head, the balance shatters. The Shishigami becomes something mindless, an expanding flood of transparent death that spreads across the land. Its liquid form consumes everything in its path. Forests, towns, soldiers, gods, without hesitation. It doesn't distinguish between tree and human, good and evil. It simply kills, out of function. This is Miyazaki's most chilling message. The most powerful being in the world is not a conscious deity, but an amoral, biological process. When we break the laws of nature, there is no divine justice waiting, only consequence. The Shishigami destroys the world because that's what happens when balance breaks. The universe, in its rawest form, is indifferent, and so the head is returned. The god of death is pacified. A fragile peace settles over the ruined land. But this is not a Ghibli ending. What we are left with is the kind of silence that feels like standing in a graveyard. This is the film's final horror. It is not the curse that rots the flesh, the history that shackles the present, or the gods who abandon the world. It's the quiet realization that nothing has been solved. The wound of this world remains open. Look closely at the ending. The curse on Ashitaka's hand is not gone. It has merely faded into a scar, a permanent reminder of the hatred that still sleeps within his veins. San does not forgive humanity. When Ashitaka asks her to live with him in Irontown, she refuses, saying, "I love you, Ashitaka, but I cannot forgive the humans." She returns to a diminished forest, her bond with the human world still one of pain. Lady Eboshi, humbled but unbroken, promised to build a better town. But her forge still stands. The engine of destruction will start again. Miyazaki's message is brutally honest. He spends 2 hours showing us a world consumed by an irreconcilable war between humanity and nature, industry and spirit, past and future. And his conclusion is that this war can never truly be won. It simply pauses long enough for the survivors to rebuild. That's what makes Princess Mononoke so unsettling. We want a villain to hate and a hero to cheer for, but we are given only justified enemies and flawed saviors. We want a clean victory, but we are handed a bitter stalemate. Every act of good comes with a shadow, and every evil hides a reason. The film refuses to comfort us. It tells us that hatred, greed, and violence aren't narrative problems to be solved. They are part of what it means to exist. The world is broken and always will be. Our only choice is to see it clearly, and we must live with the scars. That's the meaning of Ashitaka's journey, to see with eyes unclouded by hate. His quest was never to destroy evil or cure the curse, but to understand it, to look upon horror, history, and loss, and still choose compassion. In the end, resilience is what remains. Ashitaka and San stand on opposite sides of a wounded world, bound by love, divided by truth. They cannot heal what has been broken, but they can live with the scars. That is Miyazaki's final truth, that survival is the highest form of hope. And that is a vision far more disturbing than any Ghibli fantasy, because we are all living in its aftermath. Princess Mononoke shows us a world where humanity and nature are forever divided, a wound that can never close. But some stories explore what happens when those worlds fuse into one being, half creation, half creator. Next time, we enter the workshop of the inventor and uncover the secret identity of Edward Scissorhands, and why he'll never be human.